Thanks. Welcome everyone to the regular session of council for the 12th day of March 2024. Just before I get started, I just want to remind everyone that this evening's meeting is being live streamed and recorded onto our YouTube channel, so you can watch us live, or you can watch us tomorrow, or you can watch us 6 months from now. So having said that, we'll call the meeting to order. We'll start off with our closed session. We'll look for a motion to rise and report from closed session. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. I'd like to report that in closed session tonight, Council approved the closed session minutes of February 27th, March 6th, and March 7th, 2024, and received for information a report regarding negotiations to be carried on by the municipality and gave direction to staff. And I'd further like to report that in closed session on March 6th and 7th, Council conducted interviews with respect to the CAO candidates. Having said that, look for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Deputations. Scheduled deputations with respect to new items. I don't believe we have any, Madam Clerk. Deputations with respect to items on the agenda. We have Julie Bogdanowicz, and I hope I said it right. Come on up, Julie. 73 Dorland Drive encroachment request. So come on up. And I don't think you've been here, so we'll give you the Reader's Digest. What's going to happen is that with respect to the microphones, you have to push the button and hold the talk button, which is the button on your right. Hold it, do your deputation, and then when you're done, just release it and just hang tight. There may be some questions of council when you're done. And as well, I know that this matter is on our agenda later on, so you're more than welcome to sit around and watch and see how we speak to that afterwards. So having said that, I will give the floor to you, so go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you. Just you have to push the button because the folks and hold it, because the folks at home won't be able to hear you. And if the folks at home don't hear us, then I get phone calls. So
hold it the whole time.
Hold it the whole time you're talking. Yeah.
I'll make myself.
And I find that if you hold it with your thumb, it seems to be easier for some reason. So.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. My name is Julie Bogdanowicz. I'm here with my husband, Blake Markle. And we're here to answer any questions you have on the question of the easement over the public property. I'm not sure if you're able to bring up the image in the report. That might help you kind of follow along because it's a kind of complicated sort of property issue. The last image in the report shows the property, and it shows some red lines that indicates where the public lands are that kind of cross through our property. The house and the property is the original homestead of Captain Dorland, and it's from the 1790s. And it's been such a privilege to be the current caretakers of a property that laid the foundations of our country. And we've been carefully investing in and maintaining the property. When the homestead lands originally underwent a plan of subdivision, the city secured a strip of land for a walkway to connect the two sides of the subdivision with an internal green space. And this land looks and feels like our property. And our neighbors rarely use that walkway because it sort of goes right in front of our house, and they kind of probably feel like they would be, you know, a little bit inside of our property. And so the property is 3 acres, but unfortunately, the land available to lay out the new septic system is very constrained by setbacks from the house, and then also from the water's edge and from the ditch. So there's very little space to actually lay out the septic system. And the septic system design includes a long rectangular mantle. And the mantle is a kind of thin layer of sand that's just below grade. And so the layout of the mantle crosses a piece of city property, which I described earlier, which is located in the middle of our property. So that's kind of what we're proposing. But the septic tank and the primary treatment area would be entirely on our property. So should council approve the easement, the mantle would be invisible because it's below grade, and we would maintain the existing grade, so you would never know that it's there. We appreciate that the request is not typical. However, we are requesting council's flexibility given the constraints on the site. We hope that the report that was drafted is helpful in describing the condition of the potential easement. And most importantly, I just wanted to point out that it states that we will not hold the municipality liable for any damages that occur. And so should council find that this easement is problematic, we wanted to come tonight with a couple of suggestions for consideration. The first is that if the easement were provided, we could potentially sort of have a condition in that easement that says that if ever the municipality wants the right to revoke that easement, they could do that should any issues arise. So there's kind of some flexibility there with that option. And then the second option is we were thinking that the municipality could sell the lands to us, but we could maintain the public access easement over the land. And so this would maintain the primary intent of the public walkway, but it would eliminate the issue of the city having public lands with an easement on it. And so finally, the report mentions that there are alternative technologies that would not require an easement, and these have a smaller footprint. But unfortunately for our family, they present a financial hardship that would be very difficult for us to bear. And the proposed conventional system alone is a significant drain on us. So this concludes my comments. Thanks for considering this, and thanks very much to staff for advancing the report in such a timely manner. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Julie. Just hang tight, and we'll see if there's any questions with respect to your presentation. Like I say, if there's no questions now, there may or may not be some questions later on, but we'll start there anyways and see where we go from there. So does anybody get any questions with Julie with respect to her presentation now? And like I said, it is going to come back up in our meeting a little bit later. So, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Your Worship. Julie, I'm looking at your photo, like your aerial photo that's included in the Scutamata report. Are there trees on the easement? There's no trees at all. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Is there any other questions for Julie right now? Deputy Mayor Calver.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Julie, I'm looking at the picture here, and so it looks like the lines for the septic bed are going to come across the easement and then onto the other property. You own the other property as well? Okay, so what happens down the road if you decide to split or sell off them properties?
Sorry about that. If ever we sell the, basically, it would be disclosed that there's a septic system on another property that is located on those lands. And so staff felt that that was an acceptable way to ensure that, I guess, everything is transparent for a future owner.
Where is the existing septic system now?
The existing septic system has a very small footprint, and it's right next to the house. So where the current tank is where the new tank would be installed. So on the drawing, you could see there's kind of like a square within the rectangle. So it's kind of generally there. And the system was installed, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago. So it kind of predates the current regulations, which require such a larger footprint.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there Councillor Martin?
Julie, do you not have concerns if the municipality starts using that right away on a regular basis that people are going to be driving over your septic field? I mean, because normally you don't want something crushing a field, so.
We did talk about that with our with the engineer and the landscape contractor, and the mantle is actually going to be under our own driveway, and they said that it's not ideal, but since it's just the mantle area, it's just that sand portion, that it's kind of it's an acceptable condition for cars to be crossing. So that's not, like, from a technical point of view, that wasn't really a concern for them.
So the runs are not actually going to be going across this?
It's just the mantle, so it's just sand, basically. So the kind of the main sort of more technical area with all the pipes and everything is in the square that you can see on the image. It's not within the rectangular mantle.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Is there any other questions of Julie at this point? Seeing none. Thanks, Julie. Like I say, you're more than welcome to stick around. It's not a long agenda tonight, so I don't think we'll be here all night. So thank you. Moving forward, of course. Sorry, Madam Clerk. We'll look for a motion to note and receive the deputation of Julie with respect to the item that's on the agenda. Julie Bogdanowicz, moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next up, correspondence items on the agenda. Unfinished business. Madam Clerk, I don't believe we have any unfinished business. Moving on to the administrative consent agenda. First up, we have the council minutes, a regular session of council February 27th, special sessions of council March 6th and March 7th, 2024. Does anybody have any questions or comments with respect to the council minutes on those dates? Seeing none. Committee minutes, Downtown Advisory Committee and the Recreation Advisory Committee. Does anybody have any comments or questions or statements with respect to the minutes of those two meetings? And I'll go to Councillor Hicks first, I guess. Is there anything you want to highlight with respect to the Downtown Advisory Committee?
No, thank you, Your Worship. Well, one thing, we have put out the advertisement for new members. So that's already been posted and circulated. And we are meeting, Doug Stevenson will be coming to our meeting on Tuesday, March 19th at 7:45 a.m. here. And it will only be a meeting, of course, if the remaining members show up and we have quorum. But for information purposes, and I believe there will be at least one individual from the public coming as well. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Hicks. Deputy Mayor Calver, is there anything you want to highlight with respect to the Recreation Committee?
No, everything's all good there in the report, but if anybody's got any questions, feel free to fire away.
Great, thanks, Deputy Mayor Calver. Next up, correspondence for information items dated March 12th, 2024. Is there anything in there that someone wants to pull out and have a conversation with? Councillor Hicks.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, I would like to pull up the letter, the correspondence from the Township of Perry, and I would like to request a supportive resolution for that. So give me a moment and I'll pull up the words. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Councillor Hicks. We'll do that first. Madam Clerk, do you want to continue through the consent agenda?
Through Your Worship, it's up to you. I believe our procedure bylaw says we've just flagged that and we will do it at the end of the consent agenda, if that works for Councillor Hicks.
It does. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks, and remind me to do that when we get to the end of this. So, Be a Donor Month, April 2024, and Green Shirt Day, April 7th, 2024. Is there anything there that anybody wants to have a conversation with or make note of? Seeing none. Infrastructure Services, Consolidated Overstrength Sewage Surcharge Waste and Water Discharge Agreement, GFL Environmental Services. Is there anything anyone wants to highlight there in the consent agenda or speak to? Seeing none. So we'll look, Madam Clerk, we'll do a motion for the consent agenda, then we'll come back to the item that Councillor Hicks wants to speak to. That council consent to the approval of the following routine items: council minutes, regular session of council February 27, 2024, and special sessions of council March 6th and March 7th, 2024. That the minutes of the regular session of council dated February 27th, 2024, and the special session of council dated March 6th and 7th, 2024 be adopted as presented. The committee minutes of the Downtown Advisory Committee and the Recreation Advisory Committee, that those minutes of February 6th to 20th, 2024 be received for information, correspondence for information items dated March 12th, 2024, those correspondence be received with the exception of the correspondence that Councillor Hicks will speak to. Be a Donor Month, April 2024, and Green Shirt Day, April 27th, 2024, that council receive for information to those two items with respect to proclamations and SR 2024 Infrastructure Services Consolidated Overstrength Sewage Charge Wastewater Discharge Agreement GFL Environmental Services, Inc. The council received for information the Infrastructure Services Consolidated Overstrength Sewage Surcharge Waste and Water Discharge Agreement GFL Environmental Services, Inc. And further, that council approved the agreement and that the mayor and the clerk be authorized to execute a consolidated overstrength sewage surcharge waste and water discharge agreement with GFL. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. And Councillor Hicks, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. So in regards to the letter from the Township of Perry, it's my request as follows, that council support the resolution from the Township of Perry calling on the province of Ontario to amend Ontario Regulation 391/21 Blue Box so that the producers are responsible for the end-of-life management of recycling products from all sources. And further, that council directs that a letter of support be sent to the Township of Perry, the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and Rick Brise, MPP Hastings, Lennox and Addington. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Norrie. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns? Or did you want to speak to any further of that, Councillor Hicks? If not, we'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Items for consideration. Supportive resolution request municipal equipment operator course. Is there anybody speaking to this, Madam Clerk, or no?
Through your worship, I believe that was Councillor Hicks that had requested that one as well.
Go ahead, Councillor Hicks. Did you want to speak to it? We do have a suggested.
Madam Clerk has suggested wording. Thanks, Jessica.
Sorry, through your worship, I've got that council supports the municipality of, Powison's resolution in support of the work of the Association of Ontario Road Supervisors to develop a municipal equipment operator course and calling on the province of Ontario's Ministry of Labour, Training, Immigration and Skilled Trades to fully fund the municipal equipment operator course in 2024 through the Skills Development Fund.
Would you like to make that by way of motion, Councillor Hicks?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to move.
Seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Supportive resolution request AMO Social and Economic Prosperity. And we, is there anybody who would like to speak to that? I know that we do have a suggested motion, Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, I don't know if the treasurer wanted to speak to this one.
Thank you. Through your worship, I just thought that this was an interesting report brought forward by AMO for council's consideration. It's looking at, I'm just going to grab some wording from the report here. Why AMO wants to undertake a social and economic prosperity review. So they're proposing a detailed and objective analysis of the current fiscal arrangements for services and infrastructure investment that's affordable for both orders of government and for taxpayers. So it's just looking at what the fiscal arrangements currently are between the province and the municipalities and who's funding what portion of those services. So I think it was something that at this point, AMO is just looking to do a review and our council could consider supporting that motion if they so choose to do so.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Alan. Councillor Hicks.
I'll move.
Suggested resolution that council directs staff to issue a letter of support for the comprehensive review of social and economic prosperity. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion. Yep, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
I would just mention that I think when I did the math, it was 23% of all funding for municipalities is it's 4.3% for federal and 18.7% for the province. So when you consider what the taxpayers are paying and what is actually given back in this way, in this form, it should be revisited.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. So thanks, Mike. I think we got a motion on the floor. Just need to call for the vote. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. 8.3, correspondence regarding battery energy storage system. Madam Clerk, did you want to speak to that one?
Through your worship, I have nothing to add outside of what's in the report.
Great, thank you, Madam Clerk. I know we've all had an opportunity to see it. Did anybody want to comment on that? Or I know we do have a recommendation to note and receive that report. Deputy Mayor Calver.
I recommend we note and receive.
And you're making that by way of motion?
Yes,
Moved
I am.
by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Delegation of authority, section 357(1)D.1, sickness or extreme poverty. And I see Ms. Hamill's coming up. So when you get ready and comfortable, Ellen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. So you have before you here a staff report that's recommending that we delegate authority under Section 357D1 of the Municipal Act. So there are a number of reasons why we can look at the cancellation, reduction, or a refund of taxes. You'll see those written in the report here. All can be dealt with administratively. Quite frankly, it'll be dealt with factually. In this case, we're looking at 357(1)D1 is based on sickness or extreme poverty. So in this case, the information that we require to look at is not as straightforward and as factual as the others are. So in this case, we have the ability to delegate our authority to the ARB. They already have a process in place. They have trained staff who can deal with this type of information, who can adjudicate, medical records and income reports from these individuals. So we're looking at being able to have the ARB take on this role for us. I can take any questions on that.
Great, thanks, Ellen. Does anybody have any questions for Ellen? Councillor Hicks, then I'll go to Councillor Shank, Councillor Hicks. Go ahead, Mike.
So it's your recommendation that we use the ARB board to go ahead and do these assessment for all these sections or just that one section?
Through your worship, just that one section. All the others we can deal with internally. It's just that one for sickness and extreme poverty. The cases are very rare that we receive these. I haven't had any in our experience here. It's just to have in place should those start to come forward at all.
No further comment.
Thanks, thanks, Councillor Shank. Councillor Hicks.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Councillor Hicks has moved the staff recommendation, which is to, give me 2 secs. Council receive for information financial services delegation of authority, section 357(1)D.1 report. And further, that council delegates its authority for the processing of applications under section 357(1)D.1 to the Assessment Review Board. And further, that council approve bylaw 2024-0015 to authorize the Corporation of the Town of Greater Napanee to delegate authority to the Assessment Review Board to exercise certain powers and functions of council pursuant to section 357(1)D.1 of the Municipal Act 2001. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Shank. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So the point is if somebody is like both aged people, both are extremely sick, they can solicit, they talk to you, you get a hold of the assessment or review board, they can come ahead and they can get an exemption for paying the taxes on their property while they're in the hospital or whatever, correct? That's why I understand this?
Through your worship, yes, there's a process for that. And the ARB would then make the determination on what portion of their assessment would be deemed exempt and for what period of time. And then once we get that information, then we do the actual adjustment to their bill to give them a credit for that period.
Go ahead, Mike.
Might sound like a silly question, but I understand MPAC, I understand that, but assessment of the ARB, where are they located and I,
Through your worship, I don't know for certain. I expect that their head office would be in Toronto. But they already have the forms. I think I attached it here in the report. So it's a form that you submit and you can mail in, or we can email on their behalf, and you just drill directly with them.
Thanks, Councillor Shaker. Is there anything else? The only question I would have, Alan, or at least I'm going to be the devil's advocate on it, is that this could quite possibly be somewhat of a high-profile type of incident, I would think. When we're talking about taxes and people that are sick and not being able to pay, is it prudent to leave this in the hands of the ARB, or would this be something that probably should or would come to council with respect to, just because of the high priority of it, or the opportunity for it becoming newsworthy, I guess is the best way to put it.
Through your worship. So if you were to pass this and we delegate the authority to the ARB, it does not come to council. It will go to the ARB instead. If you chose not to do that and it came to council first, the applicants do then have an option to appeal to the ARB, and the ARB would have the ultimate decision if they chose to appeal council's decision. The intent of going right to the ARB for this particular reasoning is simply because of the personal level of information that we were required to make that decision, and that it's not really as black and white as the other options are in terms of making the decisions of what would be eligible and what wouldn't under that part of the act.
So the ARB is the final Supreme Court, I guess the best way of putting it, is the final decision maker on this, one way or the other?
They would be in this instance, yes.
And without delegating the authority, if we were to stay to where we are now, they would have an opportunity to appeal to council. And then if they didn't like council decision, they would still have the ability to appeal to the ARB, sorry.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. Those are my questions. Was there any, oh, Councillor Hicks.
Through your worship. So Ellen, if I have a scenario where someone becomes extremely ill or is stricken by poverty, which is not an unlikely case, council would then have to ask for medical records, would have to, personally, I don't want to know that information. That's just my personal preference. And I know as an elected official, our role is to set policy, but to get into that type of detail regarding a taxpayer, I prefer that it go to someone who has absolutely no ties to the community and is completely objective. Now, if they don't like the ARB's decision, can they come back? Can council reject it?
Through your worship, no, I don't believe they can.
I thought somebody might be going to ask that question, so I asked it first. Thank you.
That's why we're here. Is there anything else, anything further? Deputy Mayor Calver.
Through your worship, do we have any idea what the cost would be to the municipality to go this route using the ARB?
There's no cost to the municipality or to the applicant. There's no filing fee. There's no financial implications of doing this through the ARB rather than ourselves.
Oh, okay, so they look after doing everything and their word is final and that's it then, so. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Is there anything else? If not, we'll call for, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
the only thing I will stipulate is that for you to get, for anybody that might be watching, it's not as easy as anything else with this Ontario Tribunal, this Assessment Review Board, because there is like probably 20 things that they need for evidence for you to go ahead and even be eligible. So when you go down that list, I totally agree with what Councillor Hicks has said, but it's not as easy. It is basically a full disclosure, like a total audit that you have to provide and show that there is no way that you'll be able to pay it.
Yeah, and I think it was Hamill has said that we very rarely ever see them, and very rarely are there very few of them that are applicable to the circumstances. So anyways, was there anything else? We do have a motion on the floor. Deputy Mayor Calver.
I'd like to make a motion, we run with staff recommendation.
Yeah, no, we got the motion on the floor. We just got to call the vote. So if there's nothing further, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Encroachment agreement request 73 Dorland Drive. And Madam Clerk, are you going to speak to that one?
Through your worship, I don't have a lot to add beyond what the applicant herself stated during her deputation. If there are any technical questions, Mr. Nobes is able to speak as well to those.
Great. Thanks, Madam Clerk. Councillor Norrie.
Through your worship, Michael, as you know, I moved here from a city. I live in town, so I know nothing about septic. And thank you, Julie, you taught me some things, but is it just sand? Basically, it's under our little walkway there? Did I understand that right?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct. The pipe work and stone would be outside of it. It would just be a sand element of the system. So when the effluent comes out of the tank and into the pipe work, it settles down through the stonework and then eventually into the sand and disperses into the ground ultimately.
And all agreements are, as what you said there, they look after any damage or whatever. So we have no liability.
Through your worship, but we could build that in if council so chooses that that council's agreeable to the request, that we could have built into any easement agreement that yes, any there would be no liability for the municipality and no claims of damage could be arisen.
Thanks, Councillor Norrie. Is there anything else, Deputy Mayor Calver?
So Michael, let me just understand this. So this is a filter sand portion of it. So anything goes through that septic system, through the pipes, filters out into the sand, which would be, of course, on town property. What happens if somebody puts something down that system that shouldn't be there? And now we've got a contamination issue.
Yeah, that's a certainly a concern that we would have. So you know, if contamination on town property were to result, then we would be potentially liable. We could build in language into that easement agreement, but you know, rectification of that land ultimately would be potentially challenging to enforce down the road.
Thank you. One more through your worship.
Go ahead, Deputy
So
Mayor.
by allowing this, if that were to happen, it also impedes the existing property next door. We could find ourselves in quite a pickle.
Through your worship, it is possible. It is certainly possible.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Councillor Shank.
So I have only, in this term of council, we had a farmer that wanted to go ahead and put a tile across unmaintained municipal road, and he had to close that road. You just had a J.J. O'Neill that wanted to have some green space. I know, I've lived there all my life. It used to be just called R60 subdivision. The roads were abandoned. One time we took them over and went ahead because the developer left and fixed them up. Will it ever be developed to the point, or if the residents know of that walkway through there? But my only concern is, and I'd love nothing better to say yes. All right. But the problem is you're going to set a precedent here. All right. And how many other people are going to want to do something on municipal easements or walkways or anything else? So all I'm saying is could be, you've said no to 2 other people already just in the last 14 months. And if you say yes here, all right, those individuals might go ahead and say, hey, well, you said yeah, well, how come? You know what I mean? So all I'm saying is I'd love nothing better to say if you know what I mean, if you could do it, but I'd look at any other type of design rather than getting on it, because now you're going ahead and you're putting that over onto the other property that the proponents own on both sides, which is great, but Julie already said, if they sell that, then there's gonna be a codicil in between that. And if there's any environmental problem, and you know how everybody sues everybody today, the first one that the lawyers are gonna go after is the municipality. You know what I mean? Why do we have building permits, and why do we have building officials, and why do we have this and that? So instead of me rambling on here, maybe you should have the experts maybe chime in. Am I right off base, or am I close, or?
I think Madam Clerk wants to comment.
Sorry, through your worship, I did just want to clarify, council did approve the request for the tile drainage one. Okay, you just said that council said no. So I wanted to clarify for the record that council did approve that one due to the circumstances of that particular application.
They came in, they closed the road, they sold the road to both properties, or just the one farmer?
So through your worship, in that case, the farmer owned on both sides of the road allowance. The road allowance did not go anywhere, was not used for any purposes. Council agreed to the easement agreement. They have since applied to close the road, but that has not actually been completed yet.
Okay, all right. So point is could I hear what our experts say? Think about it?
I think he's, did you have any comments, Andrew? Go ahead.
Through your worship, yeah, I won't speak to the easements or legalities of the situation. I think the clerk and the director of planning have spoken to that. The functionality of a system with a mantle crossing under a driveway has been done, not a preferred solution, but we're not talking about the distribution pipe or the stone where compression would prevent that effluent from making it into the ground. So the effluent will make it into the ground. The idea of the sand is that the sand has pore spaces where bacteria can grow and kill off the bad bacteria. And then by the time that water hits the water table, it's, quote unquote, clean. I don't have any other comments. I don't foresee an issue with it. There is legalities of that. To address the concern of contamination, it would be bacterial in nature, so it would dissipate over time unless there was some commercial activities that were to take place at the residence. Then we're talking about chemicals going into the system, which is another story. But historically speaking, in my history doing this, I haven't seen any contamination other than bacterial related.
Thank you, Councillor Shank. You bring up an interesting point. Commercial activities. Should this property be used as an Airbnb? Would that be classified as a commercial activity?
So through your worship, when I was speaking to commercial activities, I meant those that might introduce chemicals into the ground. The sizing was of a sewage system. There's nothing in the building code that speaks to if it's a rental property or not. It's based on number of bedrooms, square footage, and the amount of fixture units within there. So if it was sized or there was a lot of bedrooms because it is a rental property, that those numbers would be included, or that flow, I should say, would be included in the design of the sewage system itself.
I see Mr. Nob's reaching for his microphone.
And through your worship, when you're referring to commercial activity, perhaps a synonymous term of non-residential use could be used. So meaning, although an Airbnb, for example, could be a commercial venture per se, I think the contamination concern is from a non-residential use of the property, whereby potential chemicals other than human waste could be potentially introduced to a system inadvertently, for example. So although it's not a commercial property, it's not classified as a commercial use in the building code. So I hope that helps to some degree.
Yep, somewhat. Thank you, Michael. Councillor Nori.
Just to get the ball rolling, I'll move staff recommendation, see where it goes.
Councillor Nori has a motion on the floor for staff recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Is there anyone else that would like to make a motion? I don't see a seconder, Madam Clerk, so that means the motion fails.
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
Counselor Hicks.
Through you, your worship, I have a question before I commit myself to seconding the motion. So part 38, so the property, the house itself is on part 39, correct? Okay, so part 38 is the adjoining property on the other side of the easement. Is there a residence on part 38 or is it an empty lot? Okay, so it's an empty lot. So should you sell the property? Or should you decide to retain the property and build a second like another residence there? Is there room for a second septic bed on that property on part 38? If you've already got a good portion of the mantle from 39 already there?
Through your worship, it would make development of part 38 very challenging. It may be possible if it were a very small house. However, house would need to be strategically situated away from this portion of the system that's on that part 38 property and positioned such that the well associated with that house is strategically located, in addition to eventually a sewage system for that house. So it makes it challenging. I can't say without seeing a potential design with definitive certainty, but I could say it certainly encumbers that lot.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Counselor Hicks? We did have a motion on the floor. We haven't got a seconder. If we don't have a seconder, and I will put it out there again, that means the motion fails. Madam Clerk, am I correct there?
Through your worship, that is correct.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a motion with respect to the matter that's before us this evening? Go ahead, Counselor Shank.
So Mike, from my understanding is Julie, they can put another tile bed or a septic bed. It's just a little bit, going to be a little bit more expensive than, it's not like we're saying, no, I'm sorry, you're up against the wall. It's just that it's going to cost a little bit more to keep it on your own property, right?
Through your worship, that's correct. The options are, given the constraints on the lot, a holding tank could be utilized. The lot qualifies under the building code for use of a holding tank, or potentially a system that incorporates a level 4 treatment unit, which sees smaller sized septic beds, essentially, could be further explored. There may be the possibility to have a traditional appearing bed with a tank and a bed, or just a tank, a holding tank. So there are options.
Does that answer your question, Counselor Shank? Hi. Deputy Mayor Calver.
So I make a motion, we run with option 3.
Which states do not support the application. This would require the applicant to install a holding tank or possibly a level 4 treatment unit on the property instead, which will have a higher operating cost over life of the system.
Unfortunately, yes, I don't feel that we should strap the other property with, not being able to do anything if they just, somebody decides to buy it down the road. I think we should keep everything on the one property.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Shank seconds the motion. We'll put it on the floor, and we do have an opportunity, obviously, to continue to talk about this. Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, your worship. So I understand what you're saying, Deputy Mayor, about constraints on that property, but it's owned by the same people who are well aware then of the constraints that you've put on your own property. I don't know what your future intentions are, if you intend to maintain it all as one big property that you own, including the easement, which you look after and maintain anyway. Is anything done to it on an annual basis by the municipality? the secondary part 38. Okay. Okay. And one further question, and this is just
Go
for
ahead.
my own clarification. So when I look at the easement that's going from Dorland Road, Dorland Drive, is that correct? And then it heads over into lot 21, and that's a green space? It's been a lot of years since I was over in R60, so I need a little help. Mike, can you help me out? I'm looking at the map. So this is the property in question, part 39. This is the easement between the two. Is this the access to Hay Bay?
Yeah, so
Okay.
this is all public land.
That's all
Sure,
public land?
Public land
Okay.
here, all
Thank you.
right, and there's the easement that goes from here over through here.
Right.
But this gentleman here's got a fence all the way up, and this person's cut grass way over here, and it's,
Okay.
there's no delineation between that and all these houses here are not developed on this side, all the way from.
They're all empty
his-
lots.
Are all undeveloped,
Okay.
developed on this side. And what Julie said and what Bob said, that this is extremely wet down in this location here.
Okay.
All right, so I was there yesterday and took a look at it, you know.
You get, yep, sorry.
And I was there yesterday and I looked at it. I'm just trying to rack my brain of how you could make it work without it infringing on it. The problem is as soon as you grant that, there's gonna be other people, they're gonna be right on that bandwagon saying you did it here. If we could get out of that portion of it, you know what I mean? Like, and then if you sell that portion and people say, hey, well, we have to walk all the way around the road, we can't walk through here, we didn't know it was there, you know, this could, you know, there's a lot of other aspects here that, you know, that have to be looked at.
And I think for me, Councillor Shank, I agree with you with respect to the precedent setting. It is of a concern to me because if we set the precedent here with respect to a right of way and start running systems under our right of way, even though there's no piping, but it's sand, it does affect the saleability, affects the ability to build on part 39. I mean, just looking at the plans that are included in the report, part lot 38, it would appear to be similar in size to part lot 39. And I mean, obviously many years ago, those lots were severed and created for the purpose of building. And I just really do think that this would restrict the ability to build on part 38. And none of us have a crystal ball. None of us understand what's going to happen in the future. And I would just hate to restrict that, especially knowing that there are other options that would keep the system contained within the property on part lot 39. That's my concern. And so I do think you bring up a very valid point, Councillor Shank. So go ahead.
The only, what I'm saying here is for Julie and Bob also, and for everybody, is the 3 acres, but if there's any possible way, if you could move that further it would be to the north, and then instead of it going straight this way, angle it towards the front portion of your house, you would still, I think you would, because I've seen other tile beds, and I have a lot of friends that put in tile beds that instead of having, you know, a 10-foot or a 20-foot, it might be 25 feet long, but be narrower. You know what I mean? That it could be turned and angled more across the front end of like the corner of your house near the front, instead of coming this way, turn it and bring it this way and still have the same use. I would just kick it back to them or whoever you're dealing with, or get quite a few people saying, this is what I have, let's make it work, you know?
I think Andrew, who is kind of our in-house professional, probably can comment on that. Go ahead, Andrew.
So through your worship, 73 Dorland Drive is very restricted because of separation distances set out by the Conservation Authority with the water around there. So if council so chooses to deny the application, I'll get in touch with the applicants tomorrow and we can discuss some of the level 4 technology. For me professionally, holding tanks are the last resort. They're costly for the homeowner. There is discussion that they reduce property values, whether that's true or not. There's not much data out there. But we prefer people to treat their own sewage on their own property if we can, because the taking it to the plant isn't a great solution, and then lagoons is not a great solution either. So that property is very restricted because of the water that surrounds it.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So Andrew, is there any way that you can come up with another system, since you're the expert, that would not, you don't have to, they won't have to sell their first child to go ahead and pay for it? You know what I mean? Like, is there any way that they could make something work that's still economical at the same time, or you will find that out tomorrow?
Yeah, so through your worship, to Councillor Shank, there is options. I'd have to talk to the designer to see what's possible. The level 4 treatment units are a lot more expensive than your traditional pipe and stone or filter beds. And they also require yearly maintenance and sampling, which at this point is somewhere around the $300 mark and goes up as samples go up. So I can work with the applicant and the designer to see if there is options pending council's suggestions.
Thanks, Andrew. Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just going to throw something out here, and I don't know how much it would cost to do this, but bear with me. I'm looking at the survey map. Part 39, your house is on. The easement runs directly between 38 and 39. 38 is not great for building. I don't know if you have an intention to sell or not. Would it be possible for the town to request you allow us to move the easement further to the south, would it be? So to the south side of, I'm just throwing it out there. We still maintain the easement, but nothing's running over under around it, so that you still have access from one road through to the other road. You get your septic bed with the sand, and I don't know, is this possible? Like basically it's rolling. If you have no intention to sell 38 to anyone, you're going to continue to use it as your own backyard because you own it. Just move the easement to the other side of the property. Is that possible,
That's-
Mike?
I think,
Through
Mr.
your
Mills
worship,
would like to weigh in.
it's so it's not an just to semantics. It's not an easement. It is actually ownership. So the town owns the land. So there would need to be a survey completed to close that portion, convey it, and then resurvey a new chunk of land effectively on the southern portion of Part 38. So there would be costs associated with that. Whether the overall difference in getting the survey and the registration and those matters amount to a savings in the long run versus a level 4 treatment system, yet to be determined.
Okay. So I guess what I'm, through you, your worship, so what I'm saying is half a dozen of this or 6 of that, if the septic system is better functioning with the sand mantle running over into 38, if it was feasible, and this may be, I think we should defer any decision on this right now to give you an opportunity to maybe go back to the drawing board and see if this is something you're willing to pursue based on cost. I do understand, and I am reluctant to say, sure, we'll do it for you, but the next person through the door, maybe not. So it puts council in that position where I think it has to be fair for everyone coming through, that there is a process. The ownership of that little 20-foot strip, if you put it on the north side, it is the south side. Okay, I was reading directions right. Good for me. If you moved it to the south side, and then I don't know, maybe you want to just join 39 and 38 together, make it official, marry them up, and see where it goes.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. I mean, these are discussions that I think these folks can have with staff. The matter tonight is whether we're interested in allowing a septic system to go through underneath a right of way or an easement that the town owns onto a piece of property that these people own that may affect the building or the that piece of property to be built on. We do have a motion on the floor. Am I correct, Madam Clerk?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
We do have a motion on the floor. And we can have further discussion about it if you want, other than, or we can call the vote and see where it goes.
Through your worship, can I request that the motion be read again?
Yes.
Yes, sorry, and through your worship, the motion, unless further clarification is needed, the motion is the council receive for information this report, and further the council denies the request for an encroachment agreement for 73 Dorland Drive for the purpose of installing a subsurface leaching bed. I didn't know if there were any reasons the council wanted to put in that motion, but it is a motion to deny the request.
Yep, go ahead, Ken, Councillor Shank.
So what Councillor Hicks has said is given them one option. Andrews is another option that I imagine that Julie and Bob are going to go ahead and discuss amongst themselves. So there's nothing saying that you can't come back with a better idea or a different idea of what you might want to do. But at least it kicks it back on your court that you're not dead in the water. So we don't need to table this, but to deal with this right now, I think we have to deal with this. But all I'm saying is I just wanted to let them know that, you know, there's got to be an alternative.
I think there are options, so. Is there anything else that anybody would like to speak to? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed? The motion's carried. Thanks, folks. Next up is the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board one-year memorandum of understanding. And I see Annie coming up. You're going to speak to this, Annie?
Thank you to your worship. Have nothing to add at this time, but happy to take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Annie with respect to the report or with respect to, I know we've had these discussions with respect to this at a number of meetings prior to, so, but if there's any questions or comments with respect to, we do have a suggested or a recommendation in our agenda that suggests the council receive for information the Community and Corporate Services Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board Memorandum of Understanding report, and further council authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute the Memorandum of Understanding with the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board on behalf of the town. Councillor Hicks, did you want to make that by motion or did you want to speak to it before?
I'll make the motion. Thank you.
Staff recommendation made by Councillor Hicks. Is there a secondary by Councillor Martin? Is there any other further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, Annie. Town of Greater Napanee Blue Box Transition Report number 1, 2025 Transitional Year Considerations. And I think, Andrew, is that you? Yep, just whenever you get situated there, just the floor will be yours.
Good evening, Council. Through your worship, staff tonight brings you a first report, maybe long overdue, about the Blue Box transition. Difficult for staff as we don't have a dedicated person to solid waste. So this portfolio's switched hands several times, and actually in talking with Jeff Cuthill today, he attended initial meetings in the 2012 to 2014 range. So this has been a long ongoing process. There's lots of players involved, lots of changes. Staff have done their best to stay on top of it. You know, just looking back since the beginning of 2023, we've had about 20 email updates, webinars, and things of that nature. So there's been a lot of information that's come across. I'm going to be our in-house expert or resource for council and other staff to see the municipality through this transition, obviously with others helping me along. Tonight, I just bring a report to council with some background information to help council make some informed decisions tonight and in the future. And then gather any council questions that I'm unable to answer tonight, get you those answers in short order. And then I'm just wondering, Your Worship, how you'd like to handle questions, if you'd like to do a slide by slide, or we can hold questions to the end. Some of the information council might have questions about will be answered in subsequent slides as we move along.
Why don't we do it the same way as we did the budget, Andrew? And I think that worked out. We'll just go slide by slide. I think this is important to the municipality. I know we've talked about this for many weeks and months just in this term of council, and this is going to affect the whole municipality. So why don't we go slide by slide, and if you see the question is going to be answered in a slide or two down, you can just let us know and say, okay, I think that will be addressed in 2 slides from now. So. Okay, so go ahead.
So just a brief overview of what we'll be discussing tonight, and I won't list all the points. I would like to mention a few things. We're going to learn a lot of new acronyms this evening that we all love. And some of those acronyms, as we also love, have turned into words. So I'll do my best with the jargon to ensure council understands those acronyms and what they stand for and who these individuals or organizations are. There's a lot of talk of depots. Depots, in regards to the blue box regulation and transition, are actually our waste disposal sites. So those are sites that we receive blue box materials at, and then they're shipped out for processing at another facility. It isn't their final site of disposal. And then the one big thing, and it took me a while to wrap my head around it, and it might the council and it will residents, is it's called a blue box transition, but we're actually talking about all recyclable materials. We in Napanee live in what we call a 2-stream system. So we have a blue and a gray box. But when we're talking about blue box and anything to do with the transition, we are talking about paper, cardboard products, and plastics, aluminum, and such. So we're talking about all recyclable materials. So a brief overview of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going in the future in regards to legislation. So in 1994, Regulation 101 required most municipalities to have a blue box program, and I believe that's when in roundabouts it was introduced in the town of Napanee. Since 2022, the blue box program started with the goal of 50% producer paid recycling by levying companies that create recyclables, and that's where we sit sort of currently, but we're actually kind of into that next, where we're in the future, where we have Transition Act, which allows us to continue the service we give to residents now, while we transition into Ontario Regulation 391/21, which is the blue box regulation, where it's full responsibility on producers from curbside to processing and ultimate recycling. So this slide here is just a really simplified version of where we are now and where we're going. So if you look at the slide on your left-hand side, you can see residential consumers create recycling. The local government, as in the town of Napanee, takes care of that recycling and the contract to collect it and process it. We get 50% of the money back through the producers. Through some government organizations. The future will look more like the slide on the right, where the producers are in charge of the whole blue box program right through, and there's no money coming back to municipalities, but we're not footing the bill up front for recycling. So here we go with some acronyms. So a producer, as you can imagine, is any company that produces packaging, right down to fast food services that have wrappers and containers, drink containers, grocery stores bags, or any retail product you purchase that you produce recyclables from. Those are considered producers. So the producers under the blue box legislation are allowed to get together and create an entity. which will service them in this process altogether. Those are called producer responsibility organizations, or we're calling them PROs now. So each producer decides what PRO they're going to join, with a little bit of help from the Ministry of the Environment, Climate Change and Parks. So once again, just a quick visual of companies or brands we're all familiar with that would be considered producers. And they've all joined what's called Circular Materials Ontario, or CMO, which is one of 3 PROs which exist in Ontario, but Circular Materials will be the one that's dealing with Blue Box. An example, another one is Rise Solutions, which the town currently uses for hazardous waste day for propane tanks. So Ontario will be using the PRO, that's Circular Materials Ontario, through what's called a common collection system. So that's basically it. The long and short of it is it's a one entity who is negotiating on these producers' behalfs with companies that collect and process recyclables, and then service the communities with that. Another layer is that Circular Materials Ontario has joined with RLG, which is Reverse Logistics, which basically is their software slash negotiating arm, a company that the town's working with to provide them Excel sheets of our current data for collection. So as I explained before, that last slide was a simplified version. This is what staff have been dealing with, and then a layer that will be removed. So on the left-hand side, the municipality services through contracts with a private company, the recycling materials collected. We provide data calls on our diversion rates to Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority, or PRA. They work with an industry funding organization called Stewardship Ontario, which decides how much money is given back to the municipalities, and collect that from producers or the industry. On the right-hand side is the new reality of what we'll be living with, is where the producers deal with everything, including the data call. So we won't get that data. I'm sure we can ask for it, but that data call will be done by the producers. And once again, just a different way of looking at the breakdown of where we've been and where we will go. So you can see operations currently done by local governments. The financial responsibility is shared between the municipality and the producers, and the reporting is shared between both. In the future, if you look down at the right-hand side of that table, the producers will be in charge of everything from reporting, the financials, and the operations. So a bit of a timeline. 2024, current year, we're working with CMO on statements of work. A statement of work is basically an Excel spreadsheet with all of our collection locations, our common community collection points, which we have quite a few of down County Road 9 if you ever drive down there, as well as who we're collecting from. So are eligible, and we'll speak to it later, but our non-eligible sources that we're currently collecting, and a list of our multi-residential and how those are currently being serviced. We're attending webinars and receiving updates. We have another meeting next week with CMO to go over some more things. And then, amendments will be required at some point with our current waste contractor. 2025, which is our transition year, CMO will be taking care of the curbside collection, non-eligible sources and depot collection. will be as normal, and I've denoted that with a star, and anything with a star on there, which is quite a few, is a service level decision. So that's a council level decision and not a staff level decision. We'll also, I'll work with the communications team of the town because we need to educate residents and potentially the non-eligible sources of changes that are happening. Further amendments to our current contract as well as to our waste bylaw will be required. And then in 2026, Jan 1st will be full with CMO collection. Ineligible sources will no longer be collected unless we collect them ourselves through a private contract. And depot collection will be the responsibility of the municipality because we provide curbside collection in our community. So I'd say a bit of that speaks to some of the calls for action that council has received from other municipalities that are a little further in this process. When they're asking for all areas or for CMO to or the province to collect from all sources, it's the non-eligibles that they're speaking of.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'm a couple of heads. Non-eligible sources. So here I am. Commercial farms. So you're not going to pick up any recycling from commercial farms?
So in anticipation of that, excuse me, through your worship, in anticipation of that question from you, Councillor Shank, I did a bit of a look today to see if I could find an actual definition of that within any of the legislation. I was unable to find one. The only definition I could find was a national one in a regulation that spoke to if that farm is producing products for sale versus for their own subsistence was the only definition I could find. So I'll work with CMO and get you an actual answer on that question as a non-eligible source.
So all I'm saying, so let's say I know the answer to this one, but all I'm saying is daycares and commercial properties, we're not picking any recycling up.
Through your worship, to Councillor Shank, in 2025, which is our transitional year, council has the ability to decide to opt in. There will be a cost associated with that, which we're currently working with CMO to figure out what that would be based on the number we have, which we haven't defined yet as to who's using our services. In 2026, they will not service those locations, and those individuals will be forced to find their own means of collection and processing of the recyclables. Or as a municipality, we can choose to continue to service them with a contract with a private collection company.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
You know where it's all gonna go. Somebody's gonna bring a bin in, and there you go. So may I ask, they're saying producer's responsibility is gonna pay for that. So therefore, okay, let's say Coca-Cola. So they're gonna get charged so much extra per bottle. All right, so how do they define that? How much it's gonna be, how much they produce, and it's just gonna be another tax on them. So they're gonna raise their increase to cover that cost, but it's gonna be more difficult to recycle because the end user here at ground level, all commercial properties or in commercial farms, municipal buildings, not-for-profit organizations, places of worship, and campgrounds, daycare are not gonna get picked up. So we have to, or if council decides to have that collection being done, at what cost? But if we don't opt in, we don't get the $300 and some odd thousand diversion grant.
Through your worship to Councillor Shank, yes, a bit of a statement there, but I can answer a bit of that. If you that's okay. If you dig deep enough into some news articles, you can find some producers who have already increased, especially in the beverage sector, who is a large producer of recyclables. You can find some articles speaking to increases in what they're selling those products for to cover this before this happens. Yes, if there is a lot of unknowns, and I will admit that as a staff member, there's a lot of unknowns and a lot more work we need to do with CMO to get answers on this. At this council meeting or with this report, I'm hoping to get us through and make some agreements with them to get us through 2025 and bring back, and I'll speak to it later, multiple reports to council with some definitive answers on costs associated with collection and how we can see our municipality and our commercial premises and farms and whatnot through this process.
There's obviously going to be a whole lot more work that has to be put into this, and it's a little bit, I won't say concerning, but it's a little bit, you would think this would be an all or nothing kind of thing, but it's kind of a hybrid thing. So, but we are going to have to address a lot of these things probably at a future date, but not necessarily tonight. I'm guessing that, Andrew.
Through your worship, it would be my preference at a staff level if council could make some decisions as noted in the report to get us through and in discussions with CMO for 2025. We can kind of see part of that year through, and throughout that year bring reports back to council about the end result, which is 2026 and the future of recyclables in the town of Napanee.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's fair. Go ahead, Councillor
Martin. Thank you, Mayor. Andrew, most businesses right now, we do not collect blue box anyway, right?
Through your worship, yeah, to Councillor Martin, yes, it's staff's notion that, and looking at some of the early figures, that the percentage of non-eligibles in our overall collection system is very low. Even speaking with multi-residential, you get into some of the larger buildings in town and they're dealing with all of this material themselves. Some of the issues, and we'll speak to it soon, we spoke about non-eligible sources, is our downtown core and our BIA area, and trying to separate the waste streams from residents above commercial premises becomes tricky.
Yeah. Can I continue, Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill, and then I'll go to Anne.
I attended a conference back in 2023 on this very thing, and I knew this was coming. And the town's going to be able to save quite a bit of money on the blue box arrangement, as far as what I've been able to figure out. And we're going to be able to save even more if we can get more out of garbage and into recyclables, from what I've been able to ascertain. And by the way, that was one of the reasons, and I'm sure everybody knew I was going to bring this up. That's why I was against the bag tag program back in 2023. Does it not make sense, Andrew, that the bag tag system should be a user pay system as opposed to having a special tax? Because it's an incentive having bag tags and not making people buy bag tags if they don't need them. I just would like somebody else's opinion on this, because I've done a lot of work on this and research on this. I'm monitoring all our tonnages every month. And actually, I just asked Christy today for the tonnage for February. And like I say, I knew this was coming back then. And it can be truly amazing how much the town can save, in my opinion. I don't know if you have that same opinion, but if we need to get as much out of recycle and into garbage, or the other way around, out of garbage and into recycle, because we're not going to be paying for recycle.
Yeah, so through your worship to Councillor Martin, I'll keep my personal opinions of the bag tag process out of the conversation. However, as a staff member, I understand your concerns, and my hope is when we institute this, we can lay on the education very heavily on the public, that those dollars of those fees will come from producers and won't have to come out of their own pockets. If you put your blinders on as just a municipal taxpayer and not a consumer, because in the end, regardless of how this program goes, we're all paying for this, whether it's through purchasing products or not. My belief is that this is just the iceberg of what we can do with waste and recycling collection in our town, and that this opens up an avenue for lots of different facets. And I speak to a few of them at the end of the presentation. But you're 100% correct in that if the more we divert towards recycling 2025 and beyond and keep out of the tonnage of waste or garbage, we'll be that much further ahead financially as a municipality.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. Can I just say one more thing, Mayor, please?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we need to stay focused as to why we're here tonight and not anything
Well,
else. So
I am focused. I don't know if anybody else is or not. I've been focused
what I-
ever since 2023.
what I'm saying, Bill, is we have a report in front of us, and I think we need to stay focused on the report in front of us and the decisions that have to be made on that report. But go
Well,
ahead.
You must be looking at a different report than I am.
I think I'm looking at the same report, Councillor Martin. So let's stay
Well,
focused. I will allow you to continue, and we'll make some decisions tonight.
Well, I
know-
hope
Bill,
you know,
I know you're very passionate about garbage. I know you're very passionate about bag tags. I understand that. We have a process that we have to deal with tonight, and I think we need to deal with it. And I think we need to give staff some direction as to where we're going tonight with respect to the recycling. And I do think that we just need to focus on that.
Mayor, that's what I'm focusing on. 2025 is a transitional year, and we need to make the decision in 2024 what we're going to do with the bag tags, because it's going to affect 2025. That's my focus. And Andrew and the staff need direction tonight for sure, but we also need to include some talk about the bag tags possibly at a later time, but I intend to make a resolution tonight as well after we deal with this one.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Councillor Hicks. Okay, Councillor Hicks had her hand up, but go ahead, Councillor Shank.
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Oh,
Councillor Shank.
I was going to let Andrew finish it up, but I was going to move the staff recommendation of your three. Staff recommend the council opt in the curbside collection of eligible sources during the transition year, and staff recommend council opt in the collecting non-eligible sources during the transition year, and staff recommends opt into the depot collection during the transitional year. Will we get paid by, was it SEMO, for us having a depot, or is that 100%? Is that another source of funding that if our South Fred is the depot?
Yeah, so the resolution for the depots I was looking for this evening was just to allow staff, obviously the town clerk, to explore options that might best suit that scenario or those depots. There might be a situation where we are further ahead financially to continue servicing them privately as we are now. But yes, I received emails late yesterday from SEMO with some of the data we've sent them that speaks to two different agreements we can enter to them and some of the financials of it. I hadn't had the time to review. The issue with our depots, in some regard, it's not an issue. It's a good service level, is that we take multifaceted waste there, especially at South Fred. And so to figure out, the one agreement is kind of where SEMO starts to take over a little bit of your staffing and the costs and expenses of that. And so I would like to spend some time as a staff member and with the clerk to kind of explore what those amendments and agreements look like in the long run. So there is some options there. The diversion grants back out of that when SEMO is already providing curbside I'm assuming are going to be very limited.
So there is a chance. There's so much out there that, we're just touching the iceberg. So can I make a motion
Yep, I think, did you want to make that motion stack from recommendation now? Or do you want to allow Andrea to finish the presentation? I think
Andrew
there's 2
finish the
pages left, but I'll.
I just went ahead of you, Andrew. Sorry.
So if I may continue, this next slide came from SEMO late in 2023, and this is what I call the make you feel good as a municipal staff member slide, because if you look on the right hand of the slide, the communities out of the 440 odd municipalities in Ontario, 182 as we are transitioning. And if you look at the very bottom in red there, 56 have not responded at that point to any emails or correspondence from the province or SEMO on this. 42 are opting out of parts of it, 17 are opting in, 16 are negotiating to take over the collection through SEMO. So these would be larger municipalities that have their own infrastructure for processing and trucks and whatnot. So I think we're probably in that 10 range where we've just started, but I feel like we're on a good trajectory to see town and council through these decisions at this point. So to speak to, once again, eligible and non-eligible sources, eligible sources as they stand today will continue to be eligible sources after the transition. However, the 50% funding model is now gone because we're no longer paying for the initial collection from those industries or those residents or public schools, retirement homes. Just a quick note that the retirement homes and long-term cares that they will be serviced are not private ones. So those are the ones that are non-for-profit, operated by a municipality or in our case, a county, or had been included in a blue box program prior to August 15th of 2019. And I'm not sure the significance of that date, but that's what's laid out in the legislation. So these sources shown here are the sources that will be considered non-eligible moving forward, which council has the decision this evening to opt into collection for in our transitional year. They include commercial properties, so storefronts, non-for-profit organization, municipal buildings or facilities, so 99 Advanced, Town Hall, our arena, commercial farms, daycares, campgrounds and trailer parks without full-time residences and places of worship. This is a tricky one. When we have mixed sources within the same stretch of collection or from within the same building, and the town will have to work with SEMO if council so chooses to opt out in 2025, how we're going to deal with those sources. From 2026 forward, that will be SEMO's role to figure out how they're going to decide what recyclables came from storefronts downtown and what came from the residents that live above those sources.
Yeah, I think Councillor Hicks has a question with respect to this slide, Andrew.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question, observation. The producers of the product that's being packaged, so the paper and plastic that my pen comes in. So if I'm in a business and I'm using this pen and I've recycled the cardboard and the plastic appropriately, and I'm in the residence that lives above the business, what is the difference? The person producing the pen and packaging it for shipment, distribution, and sale eventually needs to come up with a better solution for packaging so that they're not on the hook to pay for the disposal of said packaging. Why are there ineligible sources? That's more of an observation than anything. But do we actually pick up from the long-term care home? And when I ask, so we have a nonprofit, which is the John Parrott Center, but we have Village Green, which is a private for-profit. Are either one of those part of our current collection route?
So through your worship, and I think as I alluded to before, that's why you're seeing a lot of municipalities coming out with statements and asking for support to say, you're producing a product, you should see through its end life or its reintroduction into the cycle, versus leaving that responsibility to private businesses.
So one further question, Your Worship. Can I ask that these questions be asked repeatedly? Why, until you're satisfied with the answer that comes back from the, because that's splitting hairs as far as I am concerned. The producer is responsible, full stop, and it doesn't matter where it comes from, there's packaging on it, the person producing and packaging should be responsible. And I know we're all gonna pay for it, because my $2 pen just now jumped to $3.50. So, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Go, I think unless there's another question on this slide, we'll move on to the next one, Andrew.
So the next slide just speaks to our depots or our waste collection sites where we can potentially be in 2025 and where we will be in the full transition. So quickly, just to review again, current practice is that staff has a contract or the town, excuse me, has a contract with a waste collector who tips those bins for us. And we do receive part of our diversion grant from those recyclables collected there. 2025, council has some decisions based on some evidence or some information that staff intend to bring back to council in regards to how we handle the 2025 transitional year. Staff's initial thoughts is that we stick with what we're currently doing, though there won't be a diversion grant. And then full transition, those will be considered non-eligible sources. And then it's a service level decision for council whether we want to keep servicing our residents or with recyclable collection at those sites. So just briefly, 2025 transitional year financial implications. If we opt out, our budgeted figure for recyclables in 2024 is $650,000. The availability of diversion grants, if we opt out, is currently unknown to staff. My suspicion is that there is none. If we opt in, out of that $650,000, we won't pay any because it will be on CMO. We also lose the diversion grant because we're no longer part of the process, which in budgeted figures for 2024 lands with a net positive of $304,000. Just for council's reference, the 2023 actual numbers for that was our blue box curbside collection was $599,263 or thereabouts. And our diversion grant for 2023 was $339,000 or $339,000 or approximate. Speaking to service levels for 2025, eligible sources as in our residential collection system remains the same whether we opt in, opt out. It's just who's paying for that. Non-eligibles, if we opt out of our non-eligibles, that collection and processing of those materials will be on those non-eligible sources to figure out themselves. If we opt in, we'll continue as current. Depots, a lot of work still to be done on staff, what the best route is to go on those depots. Either way, staff recommendation is that we still provide that service at least for the transitional year. So just in summary, council decisions that staff would like to receive this evening, if possible, would be an opt-in or opt-out for the transitional year only of curbside. The second bullet's changed a bit, staff would like to explore our depots and the ramifications financially of those decisions first. And that, and it should say non-eligible, in that last bullet, but that we opt in or out for non-eligible sources this evening are our council's decisions.
Thanks, Andrew. And I don't want to upset your flow, but with respect to the staff recommendation, are we still online with the staff recommendation that's before us this evening then?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, thank
So just quickly, the staff recommendations I've given you is the opt-in for curbside collection of eligible sources, the opt-in for non-eligible, and that staff have, and I changed that last bullet as I've discovered more since I've made the presentation, that staff would like a little more time to explore the options for our depots. Reasoning behind these staff recommendations, opting in obviously for the curbside collection of our eligible services saves us quite a bit of money for the transitional year. Opting in for our non-eligible gives staff time to communicate those changes to those non-eligible sources if council chooses to not service them in the future. We'd like to give them an opportunity to explore other options. This opting in also gives staff time to communicate to the public that staff or the town is no longer responsible for blue box materials, and we'll roll out a little bit of an educational program to residents around that. So our full transition year and beyond, the collection of non-eligible sources, that the financial ramifications are to be determined, as I keep saying, but staff will bring that back. Waste disposal sites, once again, some decisions will have to be made by council to continue or not continue that service there. Staff will bring back some information in regards to the costing of the different options around that. And the collection of the non-eligibles, as I said, and the savings with the curbside. Service levels for Blue Box will no longer be under the municipality's control. And that's something we'd really like to educate the public about, that we are no longer contracting those services. So we're no longer in charge of the types of materials collected. So there might be different numbered plastics that another processing facility that CMO's using can take versus the one that we're using currently. For transitional year, we're going to continue to use our current contractor's facility in Kingston, but they'll have the ability to change collection schedules, collection companies, and collection methods, including if residents are forced into a bin system or not. That will all be determined by CMO and those private companies that they hire to do that. For the 2025 year, they're going to continue to use our current waste contractor, our current schedule, and our current material collection. I think I've hit most of the points on that slide. So our current contract expires on the 31st of December of 2029. Christy and myself have a meeting with Waste Management early on Monday morning to discuss our contract and transitions they've done in other places in the province. They're a large company. They've been through this before. So we're going to talk about the transition year and beyond, and how we handle that and how we handle our contract and the language within it. So staff will bring that back and work with the clerk in regards to that amendments that are going to be required there. And I won't speak much to this slide other than there's lots of materials available on the CMO webpage, and staff will work with the communications department as in the best way to get information out to our residents about the change. The next slide speaks to some future council reports and some kind of targets staff have set in regards to quarters of when we're going to bring this information back to council, and some things that council will need to make decisions on at that time. So it gives council a bit of an idea of future reports to come. Also, if there's other reports or direction council wants to give to staff, we can bring back that information. And then, as I alluded to earlier as well, just some future considerations to, for council to start thinking about if, for instance, SEMO goes, bin collection, curbside, is that a time, an appropriate time for the municipality to do the same with our garbage collection? Or are we forced by our waste contractor at that point to make that change? As well as, you know, organics programs, as Councillor Martin alluded to, it might be a good time to revisit bag tags and how we charge residents for solid waste, service levels, automated collection, and the future and the services we provide at our waste disposal sites. A long-winded presentation, but if there's any additional questions, I'm here to field them.
Thanks, Andrew. Is there any questions with respect to Andrew's presentation? And I know there's a vast amount of knowledge and there's a vast amount of unknowns that is involved in that. And there's going to be a vast amount of work that's going to be, we're going to have to get involved in the coming months and years, actually. So thank you, Andrew. I think at the end of the day, it's a lot of good news in amongst the work there, but there is a lot of good news. So first of all, we'll start with questions with respect to the presentation. Are there any questions with respect to Andrew's presentation? Councillor Hicks.
So I have one question. I'm looking at through your worship, sorry. Andrew, so future council reports. I personally, because this is a hot topic. It's as hot as garbage in August, basically, and just as smelly. Can we get communications once a month on this topic, updates? I don't care if we don't know any more than we knew last month, but I want to know what you don't know, even if it's not much at that particular time. Because I think as we go through this, there's going to be more public, the public is probably going to be more aware of the situation and they're going to be paying more attention to it, or at least I hope they are, because they're the ones that are going to pay for it in the long run through every single product that they purchase moving forward. So they're going to get hit as a taxpayer through the provincial, and they're also going to get hit as a consumer. So I would make that request. My next question is 70% of our current waste management contract is curbside collection of both garbage and recycling, correct? So we're still going to have trucks on the road. I'm just putting this out there as a point. There will still be trucks on the road every week in this municipality picking up solid waste. Recycling aside, solid waste will still be picked up at every household. You have the option to use the service because the truck is driving by your house. So it's still 70%. Thank you.
It's, excuse me, through your worship, to Councillor Hicks, I failed to mention that in the presentation, but staff intend to use the activity reports section of council meetings on the monthly to bring up small updates as to where we are in the process. And if council has questions along the way, never hesitate to email or drop by the office as well.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Hicks. And I'll go to Councillor
One more
Shank.
thing. Thank you, Your Worship. And this is for Councillor Martin, because I know every month he's very diligent about asking Christy for the numbers. I did see a report. I'm sorry, I can't remember where it was, but could we see something brought forward in the staff report every month, what the previous month's numbers were compared to the year previous for the same month? I think that if we all knew that it was something that was going to be brought forward at every meeting, it would save Councillor Martin an email and it would put it into context for everyone to see, because then it becomes part of the agenda package. So everyone would be aware that, you know, this time last year, we were only up half a ton or down 2 tons or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Councillor Shank.
Who owns Circular Materials Ontario? Town corporation that they created?
Through your worship to Councillor Shank, that's correct. It's a producer-owned separate entity with its own employees. It's its own agency, funded by the producers, but put together with the province at hand. Yes. So that's a similar, I'm trying to think of something that currently exists that's similar and maybe not a great example of this table, maybe MPAC or some of those other third-party government organizations that the town deals with.
Yeah. Go ahead, Councillor Shank. Do you have anything else or no?
Oh, I hold the pen down. I'll get myself in trouble if I say anything. Government's so efficient, eh? The other thing is that since there's a $340,000 or $305,000 saving because of the grant, all right, we do not know a lot of the financial implications and what the cost is with CMO doing certain items or Waste Management doing certain items or the eligible and non-eligible, because when you look at the non-eligible places there and what they produce recycling wise, and you opt out saying they aren't eligible to be picked up, your tonnage is, Councillor Martin will have a heart attack over that one because the tonnage is going to go way up. If you don't opt, you take them not eligible to recycle anymore, where else are they going to do it? You know what I mean? What are they going to do? You're not giving them any option. So there's a lot of reports coming in, and I know you're just starting on it. So Andrew, you're going to have your hands full.
There's a lot of moving parts. You're absolutely right, Mike. So is there any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Not really a question for Andrew necessarily, but Councillor Schenk, most of the businesses right now, we don't collect from them anyway. So there's not going to be a huge number of facilities that don't get picked up, that aren't being picked up now, I guess is the point I would like to make on that. The other thing is, and I don't mean to belabor the issue, but hopefully we can get to the bag tag program because it is in the slide here. I can mention it. We got to do it this year because there's tax implications for 2025. So that's all the point I want to make, so that staff knows what we're doing with bag tags, because they do have to include them with the tax bills for 2025. Thank you, Mayor.
Yep. Thanks, Councillor Martin. Is there anything else with respect to the presentation? If not, we'll entertain a motion to put on the floor. Seeing none, we have a staff recommendation that council received for information, the Environmental Services Town of Greater Napanee Blue Box Transition Report Number 1, 2025 Transitional Year Considerations, and further that council authorize staff to enter into an agreement with Circular Materials Ontario to opt in for curbside collection of the blue box materials for 2025, and further that council authorize staff to explore an agreement with Circular Materials Ontario to opt in for depot collection of blue box materials at both of the town's waste disposal sites in 2025. And further that council authorize staff to enter into an agreement with Circular Materials Ontario to opt in for collection of the blue box materials from non-eligible sources in 2025. And further that council authorize staff to continue working with Circular Materials Ontario and Waste Management towards the full transition of the blue box program in 2026 and bring forth additional reports to council as required. That's the staff recommendation. Do we have someone that would move it? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaws. First bylaw we have, thank Andrew. I know there's a lot of work to be done on it, and when it first started to be rolled out, it sounded pretty slick and pretty easy and pretty simple, but I think we all know that that's not going to be the case. So thanks for working on it, and you and Christy and everybody in your department. Bylaws 2024-0015 to authorize the corporation of the town of Greater Napanee to delegate authority to the Assessment Review Board to exercise certain powers and functions of council. And that was with respect to a report that we had earlier this evening. Full look for motion, put it on the floor in 3 readings, moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Hicks. Ready first, second, and finally passed this 12th day of March 2024. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carry. Bylaw 2024-0016 to adopt the 2024 municipal budget. Look for a motion to put it on the floor. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Martin. Ready first, second, and finally passed this 12th day of March 2024. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Information reports from members. Do any of the members this evening have any information reports that they'd like updates with respect to the external boards or committees that they've been appointed to? Seeing none. Inquiries. Do any members of council have any inquiries of staff that, and I see Councillor Norrie has his hands up. Go ahead, Councillor Norrie.
I was just wondering if between now and the end of summer, if staff could look at winter parking. Weather's warmer, people are living more together, they can't afford homes, so multiple families. Other cities are doing it where they're allowing winter parking under certain conditions. So I'm not asking for a big report, just if they could just check around and maybe by the summer let us know, if they don't mind.
Thank you, Councillor Norrie, and I think staff has made a note of that. So thank you very much. Is there any other inquiries? Councillor Shank.
This is a query that I would like all council to kind of look at, and Alan, is that we just passed the budget for this year and finally, and every department has their own, you know, what they've done, what they haven't done. I would like to see them. I don't want to have, I'm not saying it happens here, but I'm not saying it doesn't happen either. So all I'm saying is if you save in your department and reserves, that we don't audit, I would like to have it itemized, like, or put it in a line item. This is how much that department has saved. All right. This is the reserves. Do we put that into the reserves? Do we use it against the tax rate of the next year? But I want to have the incentive of the department to go ahead and say, let's say roads. Roads went ahead. This wasn't a really bad year. We saved certain things. We didn't. We need a new snow plow, a double axle for $430,000. In the last 2 or 3 years, they saved $430,000. The money is automatically there. You know what I mean? I just want to take a look. I want to put the incentive on the general manager to save as much as they can in their departments throughout the year. I don't want to have the idea that if I don't spend it, I'll lose it. You know what I mean? So it's a fine line. I'm not saying that they have that, but I want to give that incentive out there that I don't want them to have, I don't want anybody to have the attitude as, and we all work as a team, is saying, well, this team over here or that position over here, they're blowing everything because this is what they want, because they might not get it next year going through the budget process. You know what I mean? So I don't want to have that protectionist attitude. I just like to see if somehow when it's broken out next year, when we're going through the budget, saying this is saved. So when they need their needs and wants and wishes, all right, what can we do? You know what I mean? Because then they can say, hey, I saved, we cut here, we did this, we did that. We were trying to run it as efficient as possible. And this is what we saved, but we need this in our budget this year. You understand what I'm saying, guys? So that's, so I'd like to, you know, throw that out there, and you guys can mull it all over, talk to Ellen or holler at me anytime you want.
Thanks, Mike. And I think Ellen is nodding her head. I think she's got some ideas, I'm sure. So thanks, Alan. Is there anything else with respect to inquiries? If not, we'll move on to notice of motions. Do any members of council have any notices of motions that they'd like to make this evening? Seeing none. New business. Is there any members of council has any new business to speak to tonight? Seeing none. Announcements. Are there any members of council that would like to make any announcements this evening? Deputy Mayor Calver.
Yeah, through you, your worship. Just a little info for some of our taxpayers and stuff out there. Our hockey teams are doing absolutely amazing, right from the Crunch right up to the Raiders. Everybody's into the playoffs, and highly recommend you take a look at the websites and make it as many local home games as you can. and give as much home support as you can for our players. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, thanks, Brian. Good point. It is that time of year when the playoffs are in full swing, and I know we do have a number of good hockey teams that are probably going to go deep into the playoffs. So thanks for that announcement. Are there any other announcements anyone else would like to make? Is that a yes, Councillor Shank? Go ahead, Mike.
Not really an announcement, it's more of an inquiry. Deputy Mayor Calver has brought it up because he attends to all the Raiders games about the bar. Is there any possible way that we can at least try it just during the playoffs? You know what I mean? Just to see what, you know, if you could get somebody to run the bar for that 3 hours or whatever, or if it can be done, and just keep it and say, see how much they make. Because if there's 600 or 700 people that are attending that game, then you'll know exactly. If you can't make money with 600 or 700 people in it, then you know what I mean? I'm just thinking, given that service out there with the possible source of revenue, considering we lose 600,000 to 700,000 a year there. You know what I mean? Every little bit helps. I'm just trying to say, well, why not during the playoff time? Let's give it a kick at the cat and see what it does.
I think that matter has been already addressed for the next 2 or 3 games anyways, but we can add it into, I mean, we can add it back into the inquiries if you want to put that in the inquiries and get staff to bring something back.
I'd just like to see a staff report being brought back up. I mean, Deputy Mayor Calvers is sponsoring it, but all I'm saying is I'd just like to see it just brass tacks. This is what the cost is. All right, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, for throwing $100 towards it. But all I'm saying is see what it actually is, just to have a separate set of numbers in that bar and see what we're bringing in.
I think over the next 2 or 3 home games, I think we should get a fairly good indication as to what that will be, I think. So I'm hoping anyway. So, yep, go ahead, Mike.
If I'm out of order enough. There's a KPMG report. When are we getting that back?
I believe we'll be getting that back in the not too distant future. Madam Clerk, did you want to speak to that?
Through your worship, I don't have a precise date. I believe we are expecting to see something hopefully within the next month, but I don't know for certain. I'm getting another update on timelines within the next 2 weeks.
And we should, and I think, Madam Clerk, you'll be adding any updates you'll be adding to the forward calendar, I'm assuming, so.
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
We're getting closer, I think, Mike, bottom line is, so. Are there any other announcements? The forward calendar, is there anything in the forward calendar someone would like to make mention to? Or I know we've all had an opportunity to see the forward calendar as well as the council resolution tracker that's attached to it. Is there any comments with respect to that? If not, we'll look for a motion for a bylaw to confirm the proceedings. Moved by Deputy Mayor Cower, seconded by Councillor Martin. Look, bylaw to confirm the proceedings, 2024-0017 ready first, second, and finally passes 12th day of March 2024. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Motion for adjournment. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, folks. A little bit of an early evening this evening, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.